The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. Each year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to the festival custom. After they had completed its days, as they were returning, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Thinking that he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day, and he looked for him among their relatives and acquaintances, but not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions, and all who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay, take them back. Over the 3-year cycle, we're in C, but in A cycle, on this day, it's the flight into Egypt. And the B cycle, it's the presentation of Jesus in the temple. And with the C cycle, it's finding Jesus in the temple. This feast was established in 1893 by Pope Leo XIII. And you know why it was instituted? To support family values that were being threatened at the time. Interesting. I took the reading from Sirach because it just spoke to me. In fact, I did a memorial service outside of Mass yesterday, and the son that took care of his deceased father took him Holy Communion every week from this parish, and also made sure that Father Sean came and gave him the sacrament of the sick. And I read this because of the honor that he paid to his father. Such a beautiful thing. In the first reading, I go to my standby, the late Bishop Pilarczyk. The lesson is clear. Our parents represent God. They must be treated with reverence and kindness and respect. Respect. Do we see a lot of respect in the world today, especially in this country? This is one of my biggest griping points. No, we don't. This is an important lesson to have brought home to us occasionally. Sometimes we take our families for granted. We may not always be aware of the extent to which our parents make us what we are. The fact is that our basic attitudes towards God and the world and our fellow human beings are instilled in us by our parents. Our religious faith and our prayer life, our work habits and our priorities depend mostly on what our mother and father taught us, explicitly in their words and implicitly by their example. The way we speak and even the way we laugh are conditioned by our parents. They are the primary channels of God's providence in our lives, and God calls us to acknowledge them as such. I just thought that was a beautiful way to think of that reading and to pay respect and gratitude to parents. And tonight I'm just really glad to see parents and children here. I'm really glad to see it. Some of them I know, some of the little ones, whenever I see a little baby in this church, they get blessed. I think I did one out of the two in the back. I'll catch the second one. But I loved it. The second reading from Colossians. If you browse the beginning of this chapter, you find that St. Paul, it's not what's in the reading tonight, but what was before it. Something I learned very well from Father Sean. A lot of times when you're talking about these readings, you have to go back or you have to go forward to catch an additional meaning. You find that St. Paul reminds the faithful that he has found life in Christ, and whatever he has lost is not worthy of the new life he's experiencing. He's given it up. He does not want the Christians in Colossae, the Colossians, to return to their previous practices that separate them from the resurrected Christ. These people will look and say, oh man, we had such great traditions as Jews or as pagans. You know, to make myself feel right, I think I'll go and do these things. St. Paul is saying no. He's not telling them they can't. He's saying you shouldn't. He goes on to present a list of vices to overcome and a list of virtues to be nourished, and you heard them. He told them, we are baptized in the Trinity, and your previous spiritual life has been changed by God. As our lector's handbook states, vices are to be avoided and discarded because Christ has made Christians new creations. The love and peace of Christ binds all things, and the word of Christ dwells in them. The word of Christ, we just had the words. We just had that part of the Mass. And then we listen to the gospel, the story of being lost, Jesus being lost, both parents not knowing why. I've never ever told this story of myself to a crowd as large as this. Many people in this congregation know this story, but I'm going to tell it. This happened to me. I was born in Melbourne, Australia in 1947. By the time I was 3 years old, we were getting ready to leave. My parents took me to the Melbourne Zoological Gardens. My dad thought I was with my mom. This may stir up some stuff in you. My mom thought I was with my dad. Oh no. Little Ronald went over to where the chimpanzees were. Little Ronald grabbed the bars. There were kids, I guess, teasing the chimpanzees, and one of them came at me and got this portion of my finger. And the scream went out, and that's when the parents, they knew who was crying. So anyway, and I was lost, but I was then found, and I've lived with this little digit most of my life. I have trouble going into restaurants because when I go like this to the concierge, he says, "Oh, table for one with a high chair." And when I was drinking, a beer and a shot. Father agrees. No, I've never told this. You know what? One of the very first persons I told believed me. Most people don't believe me. So when the doctor asks what happened, then the laughter begins. Okay. What is a quick lesson from the gospel? Well, the Holy Family practiced their religion as part of their life. Religion was not an unimportant part of their life. It was very important, and I'm sure it was that way for all the Jewish people. The family traveled from Nazareth to the temple in Jerusalem many times, 97 miles one way for major feasts. So that's a long distance. And if they left for one day and made 30 miles, they had to come back 30 miles. And why would Jesus be in the temple? Because he knew that was the place where his Father could be found. And Jesus also knew the story of Samuel. Samuel's mother was barren. Hannah had Samuel. And because of the greatness of it, Hannah praised God in almost the same way that Mary did. Hannah was barren, Mary was virginal. They both had their Magnificat, and Samuel was brought to the temple to be left there as a dedication to God. Jesus knew that. And some people are thinking that Jesus thought it was his time to do that. Well, it wasn't. It was not. Jesus' parents were introducing this 12-year-old or 13-year-old boy to additional responsibility, accountability, and maturity as he advances in faith. This is God, but he's a human. He's a teenager. And Joseph and Mary have responsibility for him, especially Mary. Well, it brings up questions. Do we as Catholics accept living our faith as responsibly attending Mass and living our lives with the help of the sacraments and the prayer life? Are we accountable to the Trinity to live our lives following God's will in loving him and loving others as we should? Is our faith in God one of a personal nature with Jesus Christ as the most important relationship in our life? And now, it's the most important relationship that we have in our life now as we try to live our life in God. But it has implications for the future, especially after we die. Jesus then went back with his parents and was obedient to them. It comes at this time that we don't hear from Jesus for another, I think, 18 years about. But he was obedient. He did what his parents asked him to do. Mary, I am sure, and Joseph, but Mary especially, was very troubled by this. This is one of her 7 sorrows, I believe. Mary experienced this, but she kept it to herself. One of the people that I read said she probably contemplated on this quite a bit, saying, what if this happens again? Why am I going through this? Dear God, protect my son, your son, whatever. Another point I want to make is bring your children to Mass. I can still remember the day standing back there by the door at the 9:30 Mass, and Father was there. And I had looked around. It was a busy Mass. It's our busiest. I looked around, and there were so many children in the church. And I looked at Father, and I said, isn't this wonderful? Not only children, but young couples. Children were in the church. And I've never known Father to tell them to go somewhere else. They belong in the church. And one of the things at baptism, when we first introduce and pray for the child in the back of the church, is we ask the parents, do you understand the responsibilities that you're taking on? And one of those responsibilities is to bring your child up into the faith of the church. Bring the child to the church. One of the big points that Father has. And as we say, a lot of times the baptism occurs and we never see the people again. If you wanted your child to become a violinist, you would engage that child in lessons. You would work to make that child appreciate and maybe grow in that to become one later on in life. The same with playing sports and all that. But for some reason, the Lord takes a backseat, and it's not right. But I encourage people to bring those children to church. I encourage people to be like the Holy Family. There's a reason that this feast is here, and it's ever more important in our day and age, where the family is trying to be destroyed. It's not going to be totally. God will not allow it, but and a last message to you. I found this interesting. This is from St. Ephrem the Syrian, who was only a deacon, but he's a doctor of the church. And this is what he thought about Christmas. And just envision this in your minds. Christmas overcomes all feasts. In the winter, which strips the fruit of the branches from off the barren vine, fruit sprang up for us. In the cold that bears all the trees, a shoot was green for us from the house of Jesse. In December, when the seed is hidden in the earth, there sprouted forth from the womb of Mary the year of life, Jesus Christ.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So I was thinking about Father Sean's homily that he gave last weekend, and he quoted Ferris Bueller, and he said, "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it." And it seems like just 4 days ago, we celebrated Christmas, the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. The Word made flesh and dwelt among us, and now today in the Gospel, he's 12 years old. Just like time just flies. And I celebrated Christmas with my daughter and son-in-law and my grandsons. One is 3.5 and the other one is just 13 months. But it seems like just the other day they were newborn, and just time flies. And so in our men's group, this year we were doing, it's called the Mysteries of the Rosary. This year we had the Joyful Mysteries. They spent an hour, well actually the videos are about half an hour long. So we spent half an hour on each of the Joyful Mysteries as we were going through Advent. And there were some great reflections on the joyful mystery of finding the boy Jesus in the temple, our reading today in the gospel. And one of the things they talked about was just thinking about Jesus, the infant Jesus, the toddler Jesus, and how the Word had to be taught how to speak by his parents. And it's something to really reflect on, that the Word, because the Word created the world. God spoke and the world was created. And through the Lord's humility, he became a baby, dwelt in a manger, and allowed the Word, made flesh, to be taught how to speak. And I was thinking about that too as I was, had my 3.5-year-old who will not shut up, and the 13-month-old that just goes and you think about that the Lord allowed himself to be taught to use words by Mary and Joseph. And this feast of the Holy Family is relatively new in the church. It was just put into place in 1921. I know you think that probably seems like a long time ago, you kids, but in the church, that's a pretty short period of time, just under 100 years. And Pope Paul VI, when he said this is going to be a feast day, he talked about the home of Nazareth as a school where we begin to understand the life of Jesus. And the life of Jesus is silent until all of a sudden we hear Jesus at 12 years old, and Joseph and Mary have lost him. And I think it's really easy to look and say, how could you lose a 12-year-old? But those of us who are parents understand what a 12-year-old is like. And I was thinking about that as, in the gospel, when they finally find him, he says, why were you looking for me? Why were you looking for me? You have got to be kidding me. They've been looking for him for 3 days. And what is he doing? We hear that he is sitting there with the teachers, and he's listening and asking them questions. He says, didn't you know I would be in my Father's house? And it's a lesson for all of us. When we feel like we've lost Jesus, where do we find him? We find him in the Father's house. And we find him listening. That's what he does. He listens to us. And then he asks us questions. And today, Father, I think it was on Christmas Eve, Father talked about the year of hope. This Jubilee year of hope. And one of the definitions of hope is faith directed toward the future. And he said, put at the foot of the Christmas tree someone that you miss, someone that is gone. And for me, that was my daughter Sadie, who died 25 years ago. And when you look, for me, what brought me comfort, what brought me peace was meeting Mary at the foot of the cross. And we hear at the end of the gospel today that she kept all these things in her heart. So for 3 days, she was searching for Jesus with Joseph. She didn't know where to find him. She found him in the Father's house. She found him in the temple. For each one of us who struggle, for each one of us that question the Lord, where are you? He says, I am in the Eucharist. I am in your family. I am in your church, your parish family. I am here for you. I will never leave. If you search for me, I am there. Open, and we hear, knock. He knocks at our doors always. And he's saying, I am here for you. I am your strength. I am your peace. I am your love. At the end of our reading today, he returns to his parents' house. And we don't hear about him again until his baptism, which we'll celebrate in 2 weeks. But we're reminded that we're in this season of Christmas. We're in the octave, the 8 days of Christmas, but then we continue to celebrate Christmas. We continue to celebrate this time of joy until Christ's baptism. And then we go back to ordinary time. And for us, there's nothing ordinary about this time we're living in. There's nothing ordinary about the gift of Christ in the Eucharist, the gift of Christ in our family and our friends. And we're reminded, Pope Paul VI, when he talked about the Feast of the Holy Family, he said there's 3 lessons we should learn from the Holy Family. The lessons of silence, the lesson of family life, and the lesson of work. And he reminds us that each one of us lives his or her own mission in perfect harmony with the other members of the Holy Family. We're taught to just surrender all of our fears, all of our sorrows, and even all of our joys. Surrender those to the Lord and embrace this Jubilee year of hope, knowing that the Lord from the cross sees every one of you, loves you, and wants to be in relationship with you, in a relationship of love, peace, joy.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Merry Christmas. This time of year, we're all receiving something in the mail that is becoming more and more of a rarity, the Christmas card. And on many of those cards, we now see the perfect picture of the family who sent it. In times past, we would have had to go to a professional photographer, like, remember the ones at Sears? We'd get everyone dressed nicely, get our hair combed, and make sure there was no chocolate on the clothes of the children. The photographer would pose us all nicely, and we'd all be in these weird positions that didn't feel right, but somehow they made for a good picture. We'd get that perfect family picture. But today our lives are lived out on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. And as a result, we get those pictures all the time. The need to update our families and friends about what's been going on in our lives is kind of reduced. And so we go on. What we now have is that perfect family photo that's been taken many and many times, and we're getting that collage now. We'll get the one picture that's maybe been taken by a friend or family member that's the perfect photo, and then the collage on the back showing our perfect life as a perfect family. But what would that picture be if we showed life as it truly is, life on a day-to-day basis? It'd probably be the kids jumping from couch to couch, toys strewn across the floor. The parents would be, somewhere in the background, dishes in the sink. Maybe they'd be, looking down at their phones, trying to answer those text messages, emails, and phone calls from the parents they're so worried about as they age. Yeah, that might be the perfect picture. Christmas Eve, our family tried to take a perfect picture, and it was of our 4 grandchildren. Now, picture this. We've got the oldest, Lincoln, who's a kid who has way too much intelligence and energy for a 7-year-old, and he's chasing his little sister around, and Adelaide is, twirling around in the sparkly dress that she's got on, singing some Taylor Swift song that she knows. Then we've got their little sister, their cousin Claire, who's trying to stuff as much candy into a 3-year-old body as she can imagine. And her little sister Lainey, who's just had half a dozen immunizations that day, and her legs are just killing her. She's just crying in pain. So what do? We try and take a perfect family picture. We give them their gift that they can open on Christmas Eve, and it's their matching pajamas that they receive every year. And then we set them from the oldest to the youngest in front of the tree, trying to get that perfect picture. We finally get the baby in the picture, and we just hope and pray that she'll stay there long enough for us to get a picture. So now you've got 4 to maybe 6 adults standing behind them, yelling out directions to the oldest and praying that the youngest stays still. Well, we snap picture after picture, trying to get that perfect family picture. Here's a little secret. Perfect family photo doesn't exist yet. Even the Holy Family wouldn't have taken a perfect picture because they had their own challenges. I mean, picture this. You've got the young mother who is pregnant by a man who's not her earthly husband. You've got the husband who has got these dreams that he's hearing and nobody else can hear, and so he's deciding that he's going to take his family off to Egypt, ripping them away from family and friends, from their own village. And then you've got the kid who is arrogant enough to think that he can go and preach in the temple before he's 13 years old, and he leaves his parents, and they have to come and find him after 4 days, sitting there preaching and teaching in the temple. Perfect family photo, right? Yet, God created the family first. He designed it before he designed the Holy Church. Adam and Eve became the first family, the first photo that we would have thought about. God's design was one man and one woman who promised to live together faithfully, fruitfully, coming together with their children to praise and honor and love their God, to respect him. This was the design of the author of life, and he is the authority to which we deserve to honor. Now, honoring doesn't mean embracing what is popular or famous. Vladimir Putin is famous, but we aren't honoring him. We should honor what is good, virtuous, what is to be respected. We should honor those things we admire and want to replicate in our lives and the lives of our children and those who will follow. We admire those with courage, wisdom, bravery, strength. We should honor those who stand up for the weak, the poor, and the meek. Authority means respecting those who authored what we are respecting. Authority isn't about power, although often authority does come with power. And honor and authority are mutually go along with one another. We can't honor someone who abuses their authority, and authority is no good if we honor things which are vices or are morally wrong. Even when family dynamics are changing, it's still a family. In families, we are called to honor and respect authority. Peter Kreeft tells us honor and authority are correlated because honor is respect for authority, and authority is what deserves honor. Honor is respect for authority, and authority is what deserves honor. What we heard in our first reading is that God put fathers in a position of honor and mothers in a position of authority. They work together as a family, each with their own role, their own office, their own responsibilities. The children honor the father and respect the mother. The parents hold these offices, but none of us, none, are perfect parents. There's nothing wrong with the office of parent, even if the person holding it is failing. But that job is a job for life, and it is the toughest, most demanding job in the world. In our second reading, we're asked to consider the roles of husbands and wives, and this is a relationship of reciprocity, each with different roles, different strengths, different responsibilities. To make marriage work requires one thing: patience. Without it, the marriage ends in a kind of suicide that we call divorce. Divorce tears apart what no man should put asunder. In a marriage, as in any relationship, 3 possibilities exist with regarding to patience. If neither party has it, the marriage is doomed to failure. If only one party is patient, then it's possible to continue on. but it won't be a happy place. But if both parties have patience, then continuity is possible, and the couple can grow in intimacy, love, respect, and fidelity for one another. When wives are subordinate to their husbands, they are being patient with his male inadequacies and his male superiority in the few places where it exists. When husbands love and avoid bitterness towards our wives, we are being patient with the few female insecurities and respecting female superiority and authority in all the places that it exists, most of them more greater than those of us who are men. Male and female, he created them, each with their own strengths. Think about 1 Corinthians 13. Love is patient, love is kind, love is... Many of us probably had this as one of our readings in our wedding. I'd like you to think about changing love to our own name in each of those parts of the reading. If we aren't perfect there, then the patience our spouse, our friends, our family, or strangers show us is indeed admirable. They are honoring us even if we don't deserve it. Perhaps they are respecting the authority of our own office. We may not all have children, but we all have parents. And as such, we all fit into a family. Even if we were adopted, we have a mother and father, hopefully ones who showed us in their most imperfect way that they were trying to be good parents for us. And in turn, we honor them by respecting their authority, respecting their office, and being obedient to them. If all our families are imperfect, then why did the author of life come down to heaven to join our family, to be born in a manger instead of in a palace, to be born into a struggling poor family, knowing that he was in every way superior to everyone who he would encounter during his time on earth? Here's a little hint. It is about family and the need to create a perfect family. The church is our family. By coming to earth as a baby, Jesus came to reconcile us with the Father, not just to join our family, but for us to join his. By coming as a baby, we accepted him into our hearts, our homes, and our families. And when we do that, regardless of how imperfect our lives might be, we are invited to join him in our baptism into his family. We become sons and daughters of God, the author of the universe. We honor him and his authority by saying yes to that invitation. We are created in God's love and baptized into his family as a beloved child. We are created to know, love, and serve God in this life and to be happy with him forever in the next. This is our identity and our purpose. Everything else in the universe is created to help us grow in this identity and live out this purpose in the perfect picture of the perfect family. We create the perfect family by our actions in this life and in the next. The perfect family picture is still developing, and there's time to join in that picture. We won't be photobombing it. We'll be placed gently, lovingly into that picture.